Hey, welcome back to the Gill Athletics Connections podcast. Man, we're so glad that you're here. This is the show that, our goal is to uplift and honor coaches from around the world. And recently, before we get started here, we received another review on Apple Podcast. And, feedback, I hear feedback around the country every time I go to a track meet or track clinic, USTFC CCA. Literally hundreds of people come up to me telling me about their interactions, their positive interactions with the podcast. And that means really the absolute world to me and to Gill Athletics. Every once in a while, we'll get someone who will write an actual review, put their name on it here. So I just want to read that out. I like to read all of our reviews online here on our podcast. So this one comes from D Davis XCTF. So D Davis XCTF writes, great podcast highlighting our stories as track and field and cross country coaches. It's awesome to hear other coaches' stories and see how similar so many of our experiences are as coaches, but also hear those differences in our paths. It's uplifting to know so many of us are on similar journeys together. So thank you, D Davis XCTF, man. I really do appreciate that. And if you leave a review, eventually I'll remember to read it on the air on the podcast here as well. So thinking about those highlights of coaching stories and how similar and how unique those paths are, we're going to find really a super unique one today. I'm excited to bring to you from the Spire Academy up in Ohio, the wise, the wonderful Mr. Kibwe Johnson. Kibwe, how are you, sir?
I'm doing really well. Thanks for having me.
Now, if you're watching on YouTube, and this is going to be after the game, so I expect lots of comments one way or the other. You'll see that he's wearing a Georgia sweatshirt. Yeah, there he goes. He's making sure he represents the Bulldogs. So we'll know, because tonight is not, we're actually recording this on the night of the game. So I'm going to ask just a real dumb softball question, Kibwe. Who do you got and by how much?
Dogs by 17.
By 17. The line is like, last I saw when it first came out, was like 13 and a half, which I thought, that was a lot of points, man. TCU's playing good.
Yeah, they are. I go with Kirby, man. Like, it's coming off of a quote bad performance since he's been there. They've never done it twice. So I'm gonna go on that fact.
He is one of those coaches that I think adapts really well. Like, you may get him one time, but it's hard to get him twice kind of coach and his staff that he has there. So it will be a heck of a game. I was just excited that it was the Frogs and Dogs, but I haven't seen that like mentioned a lot. Like, I thought that'd be the whole campaign, marketing campaign would be Frogs and Dogs, and I haven't seen it. So
try to spell it the same way too, the AW.
Either way, yeah, you could either do the traditional dog or dog and then frog. Right, exactly right. Yeah. Hey, I did see a stat that, because the game's in California, right, that something like, what was the number? Some huge percentage of tickets were bought from Texas, and specifically the Dallas and Fort Worth there. I think it's going to be, dogs travel really well though, but I think it's going to be a lot of purple in the stadium tonight.
Yeah, purple and white.
But you got Bulldogs by 17.
17. I never even thought about that. So the on the spot question, I appreciate that, and we'll see how good Kibwe Thomas can be.
Kibwe Thomas. All right. Well, we're gonna find out. I love it. It's gonna be fun. I'm in there. I'm a huge college football fan, so I know where I'm gonna be 7:00 my time. That's for sure. So Kibwe, let's talk about you though, and obviously Bulldogs are gonna play a big part of your story. You have a unique aspect of a fairly long professional career as a hammer thrower, and then in this new roles as director and educator and coach. Let's start. Kind of give us a let's not go 30,000 feet, but let's not stay on the ground. Give us like a 15, kind of right in the middle. Give us an overview of your athletic career and some of the stops and locations that you've had in that amazing career. It's a lot of fun to watch you, by the way.
Thanks. Well, my athletic career was fun, and it had some chapters. So anyone familiar, there was discus throw, there was hammer throw, there was weight throw. Discus was the first love, and hammer ended up kind of picking up steam as I got into junior college, which I'm sure we'll talk about a tiny bit. Where when I graduated from there, it became am I picking football, or am I going to pick continuing with track and field, and specifically hammer? And so ended up going hammer and going with Judd, and kind of never really looked back. And then after our period with Judd there, then we went to Dr. B, Dr. Bondarchuk, who at the time was living in Kamloops, British Columbia. and he's credited as statistically the very best throws coach in the history. Opinions vary, but that's whatever, you know. But statistically speaking, it's no contest. And I think over all of those years, the one thread that kind of brings it all together was my interest in improving myself and doing and getting the most out of me, knowing that at almost every stop that there was more in there and I hadn't quite reached my potential yet. And so as through each level, that's exactly what I did personally, and pretty proud of that as it relates to my athletic career.
Did you have that drive in high school as well? And if so, how did that influence where you chose the next step? Because I totally forgot you went junior college first. I did forget that part. So second.
Yeah, I started at Georgia.
Started Georgia.
Yeah.
Then what junior college did you go to?
Moore Park Junior College.
Yeah. Okay. And then to Ashland, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So did you have that drive that you talked about? You didn't say you had a drive to set the world record, to throw a certain mark, et cetera. The drive was to improve myself. Did you have that coming out of high school? And is that why you initially chose Georgia?
I think to a certain degree, yes. I don't think it had been totally fleshed out. Like that honestly didn't really come until later in life, like probably after I was already a father kind of thing. For various reasons. Not too much later. Like I think initially part of the drive was, yes, I want to improve myself, but also to just flat out be an Olympian. And so, and that had been kind of instilled in me since I was young. Fun fact about me and my family, my grandparents until these last Olympic Games had been to every Summer Olympic Games since '76, except for one.
Wow.
And so, and so every 4 years, like the Olympic Games is it in my house from a young age.
What was their love of the Olympic Games? Was it track and field? Were they track athlete? I don't, maybe track wasn't the draw for them, but what was their draw to do this for every Olympic Games?
It was specifically track and field, but they would also, but also the Olympic Games as an event and something that probably every human should do once in life. And
so you had a bend toward track from early life. I mean, they're going to the Olympics, they're bringing back memorabilia, they're talking about, I met so-and-so, and you were like, I kind of want to do that too.
Yeah, right. Memorabilia and visiting places all around the world. And yeah. Anyway, so, naturally, young kid, I don't know what a hammer is. Like when I was talking about being an Olympian, I was talking about being a sprinter. That's where I was for a number of years.
Yeah. When did that change? When did you realize that was going to have to
change? 8th grade.
Okay.
I had something going on, like a hip pointer or something, right? And I couldn't get the sprint workout in that day. And the coach basically said, well, I mean, you're not going home, so like, let's do something. And something that he made me do was walk a mile with like a 45-pound plate kind of thing. You'd think it was like I was in trouble or something. I wasn't.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I ended up walking by like the throwers, and the guy was like, "Hey, do you want to try?" I'm like, "Not really." And I think I said no, walked, and then came back around again, and he asked again to his credit, and I was like, "Okay, fine." And it was shot. My throw was farther than the kids he was coaching at the time, a little stand throw. And he's like, "Do that again." I'm like, "Okay." Anyway, and then we were off to the races. This is 8th grade.
What? That's quite amazing. Do you remember that coach's name?
Oh, I'm gonna have to think about that one. Yeah.
I mean, I have this belief that we're all put on this earth for something, but not all of us find that something. We all go to do something good and great in our lives and careers, but every once in a while it lines up that someone does exactly what they were put on earth to do. And not specifically knowing, well, we know it wasn't shot put specifically for you, but throwing might have been your one thing. Like, okay, the Kibwe is going to be an amazing thrower when he's on earth, right? But that coach could have not asked. That coach could have not asked twice to your point, he could have been like, oh, okay, well, I asked him, he said no, he's a sprinter, let's move on.
Yeah, he's a sprinter.
Yeah, and to your credit, you said, okay, yeah, let's give it a try. And what a small, it seems very innocent, big deal at the time, and look what it led to. I mean, that is quite a little second question from that coach, man.
Yeah, no, it really was. And it was something at some point a bit later. I did end up tracking him down, because this is right, because this eighth grade for me, right? So this is before social media and being able to just pick up a phone and hit people up. Anyway, I did end up tracking him down and saying thank you kind of thing, and set the trajectory a little bit.
That's amazing. So was it an immediate fall in love? I mean, you wanted to be a sprinter, you knew about Olympics, so you had to have some kind of love and passion for sprinting. When you picked up that shot and started throwing around, and maybe even the discus, was there an immediate oh, wait a minute, this is fun. I could see myself doing this.
To be honest, I don't know if I'd call it an immediate love, but it was definitely an immediate, this is fun kind of thing. And it didn't help that, yes, I was quite good just picking the thing up. You know what I mean? So from there, it turned into, well, how do I do it in a way that looks like I know what I'm doing? Which took the rest of the majority of my career.
Yeah, that's why that just kept going, right? Exactly. How did you fare? So that was eighth grade. When you said you were good, there's one thing about being good at your school or even maybe your conference league. And then there's, as you've gone on to become, good in your country and the world, things like that. How quickly did you ascend into one of the state's best or high school's best? How did that kind of progression go in the throws for you?
And this is Aurora, Colorado. 8th and 9th grade, I was there, and then I moved to Georgia for 10th grade. So basically, I think I remember making a 9th grade kind of county sort of meet. Mm-hmm. But 10th grade for sure. Pretty sure I made state. Actually, I don't think I did. And then, but to answer the question, junior, senior year, back-to-back state and back-to-back county and all that stuff.
And
actually, one of the years I was third in the 100-meter and one shot disc.
Is that right?
Yeah. And I think it was my junior year, actually. Senior year, we had some fast kids. Anyway, and the reporter is he's talking to me, and he's talking about how awesome it is to to win shot and disc, but he noticed that my demeanor and tone was just just kind of frustrated or whatever, and he's like, what's going on? I'm like, I got third in the 100. I totally didn't really mean to come off that way, but that's kind of what it was. Yes, I won those two, and if I remember, the performances were fine, but I was after I think at a specific mark that in the 100-meter that didn't come. So
now let's make a lot of people feel bad here. How fast were you running this 100? Are you running sub 11 or?
Yeah, I think I only had one sub 11, which means my average is probably 11.0 to 11-ish. I think I ran, but I'll frame that with I also didn't practice.
Sure. Yeah, sure.
By the time throwing kind of took over, especially in my days at Georgia, I would work on blocks a couple of times, but I would pretty much just throw till my arm got tired, and then maybe try to do a little sprinting.
Do the blocks. Okay, I remember how the blocks are set. Yeah. So coming out of high school, your high school in Georgia is where you graduate from. This is not as dumb of a question as it seems, although it is a pretty good softball question for you. Why Georgia?
So at that time, Georgia had, well, not at that time, I guess, but prior to me arriving, and then obviously since then with Coach Don Babbitt, Georgia had a really great throwing program. And of course, by that time, I had some hopes that, because I played football too, that football might play a role. And I had some looks. The the Power Five, I didn't have very much action, but like basically everywhere else it was fine. And so it was like, well, do I really want to play football that bad? Or do I want to try to walk on somewhere that I go for track? And the other part of that story is my closest aunt, my mom's sister, she was the head executive assistant for the UCLA football coach for like, by the time she retired, it was probably about 40 years.
Oh, wow.
Right. So my dream coming out, like from the time I was young, was to go to UCLA. And part of that was like, try to get a little like family deal. And then also UCLA's got great athletics, and also it's LA, you know what I mean? And it just didn't. Well, okay. And then senior year, I go out for Arcadia Invitational. That was my first kind of like outside of Georgia competition and I remember it was on Dicestat and they did a whole write-up, and it's like, who's this mystery guy from Georgia, and this was prior to me going to Arcadia. And so when I got there, there was just a whole lot of energy about it, which was really cool. I didn't really know any better. And ended up taking second actually to Lucas McKay, who's now one of my best friends.
Get out. That's awesome.
That second. That's when I first met him and his dad and all those guys. Got second with a season. Actually, that throw there was my PR in high school. And during that trip, I went on an unofficial visit and saw Art, kind of hung out. And he was like, you know what? Like, we'd love to have you. I think he had some money tied up in some other athletes. And he's like, but like, you'd kind of be an idiot to leave Georgia. I'm like, yeah, you're right. I just wanted to go with like, anyway. And so from that point on, it was pretty easy. And there were still a couple other schools, but I kind of made it clear that I think Georgia was what it was going to be. I was strongly advised not to walk onto the football team. So I decided to do that and had that scholarship and had a lot of fun.
What year did you graduate high school?
99.
99. Okay. I was trying to think so I graduated a few years earlier than you. So I was just trying to think where, kind of where my journey was for track and who I knew. And of course, you're talking about 99 for UCLA, still in its heyday with Art Venegas as far as who they were having throw for them. And I mean, it was a powerhouse at that point. Yeah. And I don't know where Don Babbitt was in his career. I've always known as Don as being just a genius. I mean, that's why I said it was kind of a duh question. It's like, well, of course you went Don Babbitt. You could have done a lot worse. That's for sure. But I don't remember, was he like, where was Reese Hoffa and him coaching, like where was that? Was Don just getting to Georgia or what?
That was, I think Reese had one more season, senior season, when I showed up. So this was the heyday when Bro was there, Adam was there, Terry was there, Jason Tunks was there.
Oh, wow.
And I came into that. Andres was there, the hammer thrower. Like it was pretty badass.
Yeah. Yeah. Like I said, it could be a lot of worse places. That's for sure. Yeah. I'm so glad that football didn't win over for you. I mean, things could be a lot different right now. What did you're not overly tall. What position did you play? I'm thinking running back, just because you got the sprint speed along with the strength and agility.
Strong safety.
Really?
So what I tell people is I was like the big, fast, strong safety before Sean Taylor made it like really cool.
Right.
And before he took over the NFL.
Dude,
I should say before Sean Taylor. Rest in peace. He was amazing. But yeah, that was kind of my position. And then in junior college, so in high school, it was still strong safety. And then like I did a little running back there. Yeah.
Yeah. That's what I thought. Yeah. I can imagine you as a safety. Oh my gosh.
I think I had 6 off returns for touchdowns like my senior year. Like it was pretty crazy.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So you go to Georgia. Is that the first introduction for the hammer for you?
Yes, like kind of yes and no. So my senior year is probably like a month before graduating. I ended up going down to compete in Marietta at Mike's place, Mike Judge.
Mm-hmm.
And if you know Mike Judge, you'd probably know exactly what he would do. He asked about the hammer. You want to throw some hammer?
So
No,
you have to throw the hammer. Yeah, there's no ask. It's you are throwing the hammer.
yeah. And it was kind of honestly kind of similar to the coach in Colorado, where I'm like, not really. Like I'm here to throw discus and whatever. And I don't really know how the circumstances played out either. I did compete and then threw, or competed and didn't like my performance and then threw just to take some aggression out, kind of thing. Anyway, so ended up throwing, hated it, completely hated it.
Really?
And then that was that. Yeah. And so
because it was so different than, I mean, of course, shot and discus are completely different. What was the hated part?
Probably, it's like, I think it's something that you find reasonably often at the college ranks is you have someone who's, pretty good athlete. I'm okay saying that about myself. And then you give them a hammer, and being a really good athlete and hammer don't always mix. You kind of like, you got to be a hammer thrower. It's just kind of that simple. And so that thing kind of throwing me around, knowing that like there isn't really that many things in my life that I just haven't been able to do or like enforce my will upon, and that is a bit of a difference maker in the event.
That's an interesting spot right there to fast forward a little bit, because what you just stated there about imposing your will on the event and the implement very much contrasts to you and your, what I'm going to call your attitude today about the hammer, just based on your social media post and the way you, I don't even want to say the way you talk about the hammer, the way you philosophize about the hammer. So it's interesting that you said there. So for the sake of time, let's do a fast forward. So you go to Georgia, you actually end your collegiate career at Ashland University, correct?
Yes.
With the great Judd Logan, Gill Athletics Connection alum, and one of the just the best people in the world. How did that time being with such a special person, did that change you? Was it more of the same? Talk to us a little bit about Ashland.
Yeah, Ashland changed me in a variety of ways. For one, that's where I met my now wife and life
I thought
partner.
so. Yeah. She's so awesome, by the way, man. You got so lucky, dude.
So we met there, and the majority of our time, we were there 5 years. We were dating, and so that part ended up being really, really good. And training with Judd was amazing. I've never met a better motivator.
Mm-hmm.
And in terms of exercise selection and like programming stuff, and yeah, he pulls from here and here, obviously. Like, I'm not saying it was 100% Judd's thoughts, but I've never been a better athlete. Like, I could jump 4 stories high if you asked me to, kind of thing. That was a lot of fun. And during that time though too was really cementing the love for hammer, and then figuring out that, by the time that we did end up leaving and I had graduated and she graduated with her master's, it was like, if we're going to go anywhere, like, because one of the options was staying, but like, excuse me, if we're planning to go anywhere, like, it's got to be something to make this, I don't know, go where we think it can, because obviously we didn't know. But yeah, so that was a really, important part of our life. And plus, and we have a lot of friends. Like, living there could be kind of interesting, especially like, I'm from California and she's from British Columbia, right? So still West Coast. Like, it was interesting, don't get me wrong, but at the end of the day, probably to this day right now, some of our closest friends are from our time when we lived in Ashland.
I love that. And I love, talking to, I've had several Ashland alums and specifically Judd Logan alums on the podcast. And, we were so lucky to have him, what is it, 2 years ago now. He's kind of one of my OGs. I think he was within the first 50, the interviews that we ever had here, and talking about culture specifically is what we were discussing. But, just an amazing person. I got to know him actually from hiring his son here at Gill way back in the day as well. Yeah. So just always, it's always interesting when you mention his name. 100% of the time, the other person, it's an automatic smile because you just start having the good memories and the effect that, you know, he had on your life and in multiple aspects. So I just would be remiss if I didn't bring up the great Judd Logan, who is still, by the way, from a long time ago, this is 130 episodes ago when Judd was on the podcast, top 10 episode that we've ever had. So I think this one's 191. He is still top 10 of all of those 191 episodes, man, and deserves every one of the listens that he gets there. So nice. you guys went all in. As you mentioned, you went with Dr. Bondarchuk, who, you know, you said you can argue if he's number one ever and all that kind of stuff. You know, when you get to that level, it's kind of like if they're in top 5, they're number one, right? I mean, and he's, you know, you can argue if he's number 1, number 2, number 3, who cares? One of the top throwers in the country, in the world ever. You earlier talked about your grandparents and the love of the Olympics in general, and then track and field specifically. So it kind of became like, I want to be an Olympian. So what was it like when you first made it?
That's not the direction I thought you were going. It was pretty, well, it was emotional, but not like, you know, crying and bowling kind of thing. Not that there's anything wrong with that. There isn't. But I mean, I remember barely being able to leave the ring. So this is Hammer Time 2012.
It was 12, right? Yeah, that's what I was trying to. I couldn't remember if it was 08 or 12, but I thought 08 was kind of early. Yeah, 12.
Yeah, we did it at the Nike campus, and so
that's right.
You know, which is an amazing event. I kind of threw Goopy, but you know, I got the win. So the energy around it was substantial, and like the weight that I self-imposed on my back was substantial. So 2008 trials, I'm number 1 in the US, fully expecting to make the US team, barely qualify for the final and then foul out. 2008. Wife had a similar story. She was highly ranked in Canada, didn't perform very well at the Canadian trials. And so that was kind of like our, what are we going to do about what our performances are? And we were in Kamloops like 2.5 months later. And also part of that story is going from Ashland, going from the United States to Canada to train with Dr. B, who at the time, like, I think people knew he was there, but there wasn't a whole lot of discussion about anything, you know? And so it was like this, what is he doing? What, you know what I mean? And that first year, as expected within my own training group, didn't go that hot. And so it's like, there was just a lot going on. So for, you know, 2010 and 2011 to be great years, and 2012 to be all right, making the team after all of that was a lot. I had wobbly legs. I ran. Were you there?
I was, yeah. Oh yeah, because I had to do that stinking hammer cage up on Nike's campus.
Yeah. I went to like midfield and just kind of tried to soak it all in the grass, and I did some grass angels, and which when I went down media row, I immediately regretted. I was so itchy. Like answered all these questions and like just scratching, like, you know, I'm at Larry or something, you know. My goodness.
Yeah, you're right about the atmosphere there, though, because, you know, we had it lined up on the sector each way, you know, the big stands, and then people, and then at the far side of the sector, a little beer garden. So there was a lot of people hanging out there. It really was. And by the way, so we're on Nike's campus, so there are no other events going on. There is no 100-meter prelims or whatnot. It was hammer only, focused on the men and women one day. And it was, I mean, the Tiger Woods building is right there, the Michael Jordan. I mean, everything was right here. Let's do it, hammer. And I don't regret, but it was super, super hard to do that stinking event because we had to bring a hammer cage to Nike's campus. But it really was kind of amazing.
Yeah, I would say like it was 5,000 or 6,000 people were there, and like it was
easily
incredible. Yeah.
Every year that goes past, I add another 1,000. So actually, I'm up to there's about 12,000 people.
The only thing though was the beer garden was closed by the time I came out of
oh, I'm sure.
Drug test stuff. God, guys, come on. But I got to speak to MC Hammer too. That was another thing they did. Like
Yeah.
the I don't know if it was the winners or top three. They like called MC Hammer.
Yeah. Of
But
course. He's like, I don't even know what this event is, but okay.
yeah. Well, and I don't know if you remember, like I was honestly surprised because the marketing for the event at first started like they were calling it Hammer Time, and they got a cease and desist from like him. Anyway, but yeah, that was a lot of fun. Surprised to hear from him, but it was totally cool because I like born in San Francisco but grew up in Oakland, so right. MC,
yeah,
big for me, right? Yeah.
that is cool. I love that. So let's move forward. Let's set aside our athletic career, and it was amazing. We could do hours just on what you have done athletically, sir. But I want to get into your next stage of your career of coaching and performance, and I don't know, I want to call it hammer guruing, and really, and actually, maybe not even say call it hammer guruing or philosophizing, but more throwing, philosophizing and thought processing, and really kind of going into your continuing your, how do I improve myself in my event and things like that. So where does, you're a very smart guy, very bright guy. You've had a lot of different experiences in this world. You could have gone a lot of ways in your career, but your career did move towards the coaching side, but even kind of a unique coaching side. You're not coaching at Georgia because, Babbitt's still there. So you got a while for that one. But you've done some other things. So talk to us. Why did you go into coaching, and kind of what was the first opportunity that came about for you?
So in the last couple of years in Canvas with Dr. B, I had recognized that I'm probably in the last few years of my career, at least the ones where I was throwing what I consider to be good results, which, by the way, that was part of the decision to leave, was not wanting to be the best in the US for the sake of being the best in the US. My drive was at that moment, I didn't always have that drive, but that drive that helped me choose or pick to go with Dr. B was to be amongst the best in the world. And that means like throwing far. Excuse me, sorry, I just had a message from the wife.
That's always important. Don't be afraid to answer that if you need to. I've seen her, met her. In fact, I met her at I think it was the Hammer Time. Maybe it was another one of the U.S. Nationals. Well, no, because your little girl was born, so this wouldn't have been 12, right?
Brooklyn was around then.
Okay. Yeah, I remember. Okay. So Brooklyn was just born because I remember seeing her and talking to the little baby. But yeah, she's no one to mess with. So don't be telling her that I said you couldn't answer her text because you were on the interview. Okay. I don't want to, no wrath of mom is coming my way. Trust me.
Seriously. Yeah. And so, between my own personal relationships and conversations and my agent, and just kind of like put it out there, like, yeah, I'm interested in kind of seeing what I can do, whether that's retire right this second and start a job, or is there somewhere where I can just kind of segue it or whatever. And there were some NCAA thoughts as well, but ultimately, like at the time I was leaving it open. So the opportunity comes through for IMG Academy in Florida. And what I really liked about it was I would have the opportunity to coach anyone and just about at any time. Where NCAA, like there's, depending on like where you are in conferences and all that stuff, there's restrictions on that. And so going into it, like it was never going to be a flat no for me, but I wanted to kind of keep my options open basically at that time. And also I knew I would still be able to throw. And at the time, I was still kind of the best in the US, but holding on to like getting back up to 79, 80, 81 meters, which didn't end up coming. But I could still train. And so at the time, that seemed like the best for me. And then seriously, like within 12 hours of being offered and accepting, I had a friend of mine from Ashland. He took over as director of a program and asked if I could be a throws coach. And I was like, oh no. So anyway, that's just part of what made that all. So in terms of like my coaching life, that was a fork right there, right? Mm-hmm. Otherwise, I'd probably still be at NCAA. Yeah, so that's kind of the story there. And then there's been, obviously just like any other time, as soon as the recruiting, carousel gets going, there have been conversations, but I like what I do.
Yeah. So talk to us about IMG. Not a lot of people maybe know of IMG specifically for track and field. I mean, IMG's football team certainly gets in the news a lot and things like that. I've had the pleasure of being on campus before. We did the Division II national championships down there several years ago, and it really is a unique place. Talk to us a little bit about IMG Academy and what was your role specifically?
So my role was throws coach and a bit of kind of recruiting / business kind of person, anything that I could help drum up business, which kind of came into play when I would facilitate like Europeans, like for their training camps and stuff, which ended up being fun. So I would have like friends or people who then became friends because I knew them from the throwing scene, and they would come through. So that for me was a lot of fun. So IMG itself is a sport academy. And it started as a tennis academy way back in the day.
Bollettieri, I think.
Bollettieri, yeah, actually just passed away a week or two ago. And IMG ended up coming through and buying it. I forget when, but maybe 10, 15 years into their journey. And it's just kind of like grown into this really big thing. When I got there in 15, we were in year, I'd say 4 of track, I think. So we had 13 kids that year, and by the time I left, we had 56.
Wow.
Of that number, I had 10 throwers, 7 of which were main event, and I had 5 seniors, and all 5 got scholarships. And this is the COVID year too, right? So like half the season was just thrown out the window, but they had already demonstrated enough. So I was really, really proud of that fact. 3 of them got full scholarships. Like it was, and one of them was a converted swimmer who had never thrown before.
Oh, wow.
So got some money. So it was like, it was probably that was a really fun year despite the world.
Was that a swimmer at IMG that converted the throws, or because I always wondered, you go there to be very hyper focused on your sport. So I always imagined that there would be less cross sport there at IMG because you go there to do football or you do baseball, etc. So was that swimmer, like, did you convert them? Like, did you steal from the swim team?
So her dad worked on campus in academics, and there is no swim like program there, and so she did swimming like off campus as part. Yeah, so she would have. So there's a program where you can go to school there and not participate in the sport, but you basically get to do everything else. So like all the mental and nutrition, all that stuff. And so at like the check-in, like opening weekend, our table, the track and field table, was next to the table for that group. APD is what it's called, right? The ones who come but don't do a sport. And I'm like, what do you do? I'm like, you want to throw? You should do track. You should throw anyway. And so yeah, she ended up coming out and doing it. It was fun.
Oh wow, yeah. I always imagined there'd just be less cross play there unless someone was specifically like a track football person. So I was wondering about that. I didn't know they didn't have swimming.
I think technically like it is open, and there for sure has been athletes do multiple sports. In our experience, it kind of came down to communication between the directors. And at the time, the track director and the football director didn't get along. So we didn't have anyone. Stuff like that.
You spent how many years? 5, 6 years?
Yeah, about that. 5.5 years.
compare coaching at the IMG in regards to, you mentioned all the things like nutrition and mental, et cetera, that they're maybe a little bit abnormal compared to the average high school, but you've been to some pretty intense programs collegiately, and you know of other people in different programs. How does IMG, what makes IMG different? Like, why do people go to IMG?
I would say people go to IMG because they have a focus on either getting to the next level being university, or for their sport professional. So that's something that you can kind of get in sports like golf and tennis. We had kids that were in high school who were straight up pros making just a ton of money. And the school itself, it's the most expensive high school in the world. That's just what it was. And it kind of has been for, I don't know how long, 10 years at least. And I think from a track perspective, an athlete who comes out of something like that, they should, I don't like should, they're more likely to have an upper hand on a kid that goes out of, Joe Schmo high school. Not always. At the end of the day, it comes down to, genetics and stuff, but
right. can't beat that.
Yeah.
That's the difference. I know if you're watching on YouTube, you're like, what is the difference between Kibwe and me? It's just genetics. That's the only thing. You brought up the cost of IMG, and when we went down for our site visit, and I can't remember who the director was back then. Nice guy. I really liked him. Daughter was a good track athlete on the track team as well. And I asked him, I was like, I always like asking this every college I go to anyway, just because I'm curious. I got two kids, 12 and 9. So I'm like, well, I'm going to be paying this one day. So how much does it cost to go to school here? So I asked him, I was like, so what, how much does it cost to go to IMG? And he's like, well, how much do you think? And I was like, well, I know it's a lot. I was like, and I've got a pretty stupid number in my head, but he goes, go ahead. What's that stupid number? And I was like, man, it would be just stupid if it's like 60, 65, expecting him to go, oh yeah, no, it's lower. He's like, yeah, no, more. I was like, oh my God.
Yeah. In a few years, you might have to double that.
Yeah.
Because like the business structure, like as it is, it seriously, it keeps going up. It went up every year I was there. I'm pretty sure it's gone up every year since. But like, people are still paying it.
Right.
So,
well, I'm quite happy with my school system here in Illinois. So you did well. You mentioned several kids going on for scholarships to throw and taking swimmers and making them throwers. Even they get scholarships for crying out loud. And obviously you were a good coach. How did you kind of come up with your coaching style and philosophy through this point? Are you doing now you had some amazing coaches. I mean, so let's just talk about 3 of them that you had that we've already talked about, from Babbitt to Judd to Dr. B. I mean, give me the, oh gosh, what's it called? I'm a terrible historian. What's it called? The president's thing? Mount Rushmore. So yeah, every historian right now is yelling at me like, how did I forget Mount Rushmore? I've never been. All right, sorry. So give me the Mount Rushmore of throws coaches. Those 3 might be 3 of the 4 or however many that are on there. Did you just take, I shouldn't say just, did you take parts of their style of how they coached you to start formalizing how you coach, or any other coaching education? What did you do to kind of start creating your style?
I think that's pretty safe. Part of it was probably intentional, and part of it is just what got, absorbed through osmosis, just being around everyone. And what I like about that is the combination, is the experience in a stereotypical North American program, and then also doing something like how Dr. B coaches, right? And so there is obviously value across the board. One's not better than the other for the sake of just being better than the other. Like, I think that's dumb, but there's just a lot of stuff out there. There's a lot of stuff to do. There's a lot of stuff to experiment with. And especially the first little walk. So the other side of IMG as a coach and business model is we did camps like
that's right.
nonstop. Like seriously, probably 50, 51 weeks a year. I was coaching camp.
Wow.
And so now I didn't, the first few years, I probably had campers, I don't know, at least 40, 45 weeks of the year. And then the last couple of years, it almost kind of flip-flopped for whatever reason. They changed how they do stuff, and then I got less campers, but whatever. And so the opportunity to kind of, you know, spit out what it is that I wanted to see and do and talk about with athletes twice a day, 5 days a week, I think really helped me kind of hone in on stuff. And then also just my personal journey. So like I mentioned a little bit earlier, like things did change for me as an athlete because I was still competing. And then as a man, and then as a coach, when my first daughter was born in 2012. So I think a lot of that is just kind of, it just, you know, relates across the board. Parenting, being a partner, being a husband, you know what I mean? Leading, directing, coaching, like it's pretty much the same conversation. You're just inserting different words.
Right. Yeah. No one thing is the thing. Right. Yeah. On those three coaches that you did have, and we don't talk X's and O's here on this podcast, so not talking about workouts and things like that, but you have three uber successful coaches in their own rights. I mean, again, you may have the argument that all three of them are in the top 5 ever hammer throwing coaches, the throwing coaches in general. How radically different were they coaching for you? Like, and not maybe necessarily like, oh, well, Judd was the most charismatic and motivational, and Dr. B was the most technical, but did each of them have kind of their own idea of how the hammer should be thrown technically wise, or were they all the basics all kind of the same and there were just maybe little differences that they brought to the table?
So I think that's a good question. I kind of got talking with this with one of my athletes here last week, maybe. And for the most part, especially I would say like in my travels and being all over and talking hammer with anyone who will listen sometimes, for the most part, people understand the event the same. Regardless of geographic location or whatever else, the nuance is in communication. How do people get out what they believe to be, you know, true or the case to their athlete? And that's kind of where you end up with, you know, quote, good, bad coaches, even though that's not really a thing for me either. But it's like, it's the communication. How do they get out to the athlete how what it is that they want to see?
Who do you think you most resemble out of those three as a coach?
Probably Dr. B the most, but probably Judd and Dr. B, I think.
Are you smashing chairs in the weight room?
No. No.
That's my, if you're a Judd, you know, from the videos and stuff, I was like, oh, well, if you're not smashing chairs, then I'm not sure.
I think like kind of like, I mean, I don't know. I think like kind of the relating part. So with Dr. B that I found interesting and eventually grew to love is, you know, he taught himself the English language like by reading a dictionary.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
So there wasn't a lot of communication. And I think most recently, and the stuff that interests me and that I spend time reading and watching or whatever, like there was a ton of value in that, and not showing up to practice and being bombarded with 50 different things. You know what I mean? There was like the one or the two things, and then if I did it well, he would say good or double excellent or triple excellent. These are real terms here. or no, you know. So I heard no so much. So much. it was like immediately transported me to being 7 again. Like it got to be like that sometimes. So it's just like, no. And he's not going to beat around the bush about it. Like if we're not doing the thing, like it's a no for me.
You're like, here's a thesaurus. Let's find some other words for no.
Yeah, anyway, so now like, and with as, educated and learned as he is, like, I wonder if like some of that was intentional or not. I don't know. I'm totally like reaching there, but like, so he's a doctor of pedagogy, so coaching, right? And with that comes a lot of, or came a lot of psychology, courses and whatnot. So there's certain things like that would just kind of hit me while I trained with him for all that time. And then since, as I've started working through my own thing, I'm like, I wonder if he did that on purpose.
Right. Like, wait a minute.
Yeah, wait a minute. That guy. Oh, man.
Usually the best ones have a plan. I bet he always had a plan.
Yeah, he had a plan, and it was written down and all of that.
That's awesome, man. So you spend 5-6 years at a unique place. This is not your average high school at IMG. Do you go from IMG straight to Spire, or was there somewhere in between?
There wasn't in between. We actually went to Vancouver Island. So, and this is still like kind of COVID and all the other stuff, right?
Right,
and so,
right.
There was just a bit of time where we didn't really know what was going to happen, and then we ended up kind of logging in. You're like, you know what? Like, let's go somewhere where we want to be. And at the time, we decided that Canada felt pretty good. Let's go to the island so we don't have to go where the weather sucks most of the year. And that was a really great opportunity. And so I was gonna find some stuff to do, and at the end of the day, it ended up being like my girls were in a really great school, and Crystal was working at this. It's the only equestrian high school, like boarding school in Canada. It was so cool. But I kind of like miss coaching, and coaching as a profession in Canada is not what it is here. Now you have coaches, right? But they're with clubs. They typically either make very little money if all they're doing is club, or they have another job and they do club. So as a career for what I want for myself and my family, that wasn't really viable for me. Yeah, and along the way, Dwight Phillips, of all people, actually connected me with a gentleman by the name of Ted here at Spire, and our conversations were great. We liked what I had to say. I liked what he had to say. He actually started IMG with Nick Bollettieri.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I didn't know that part of it.
Yeah. So there was a lot of there's several members of senior leadership that have IMG connections. And so it was like, this is this really kind of cool vibe going on where it's like, yeah, we've however many of us had that experience, but now we're here and we're really trying to build this thing. Obviously it's similar, right? Everything that I said about IMG is what this place is structurally, but we are trying to lean towards a bit of a difference. Yeah, so that's where that ended up going.
So tell us about Spire for those of us listening that have no idea. We keep saying Spire Academy like it's University of Georgia. Most of us know where that is, right? Talk to us about Spire Academy, what it is, where it is, etc. Kind of give us a catch up there.
Yeah. So Spire Academy is a sport boarding school, and we are in Geneva, Ohio, which is about 45 minutes or so from downtown Cleveland. We're to the east, so we're between Cleveland and Erie, right on the lake. Summers and late springs and early falls, absolutely beautiful here. And then there's the rest.
And Cleveland winter.
Yeah, today was sunny. It's great. I was like, I'm at coaching, but the ring is like in one direction, but the sun's behind me, so I kept turning around to get the sun. Anyway, I thought that was funny. And And so the difference for us right now is the academy itself is really young. Like this is year 2 kind of and a half, which again, it started basically during COVID. So Spire as a facility has hosted, and the director prior to myself, Charlie Powell, the great Charlie Powell, I should say.
Great Charlie Powell, yes.
Who spent several decades, I suppose, 3 decades at least at UPenn. Then he came here. He came here basically when the facility was first built. So it was around about 10 years hosting, doing events prior to an intense effort to have an academy. And so that happened with the new owner who came in December 2019. And then I came in, I guess a year after that. So they went a year essentially trying to get their ducks in a row, trying to figure out what direction that they were going to go. And then I came in February 2021.
And you mentioned,
I want to say 80s, maybe 90 student athletes across all our sports. We have camps, we have, post-collegiate program now that I got off the ground. And then of course, like the academy itself. So it's 9th through 12th grade plus a year post-grad, 13th grade, basically. Yeah, it's going pretty well.
You mentioned the events, it's hosted NAIA nationals. It hosts Big Ten indoor track championships all the time. We've done NCAA championships there. It's quite, Charlie gave me a tour once several years ago now. The old Cleveland Cavaliers basketball floor is down there. And that's just one of the areas for basketball, by the way. There's a lot of basketball there. I love where the outdoor track sits. I kind of like that, just, in between everything kind of feel to it. Yeah. I just love that. But it is really an interesting place with amazing facilities. I've seen lately where you've hired several other coaches to come in and start helping build out the team. Talk to us about them, and then some of these camps that you're doing. You're doing some pretty, once you explain who the people are you've hired, you'll understand that the camps are high level because you're hiring high level people. So talk to us about the people that you've got going.
Yeah, right. So we have Tim Mack, 2004 Olympic gold medalist in pole vault. He coaches vertical and horizontal jumps. With obviously probably the specialty in pole vault, but he's taken a bunch of continuing education classes with USA Education the last 2 years because he's found out that he loves the jumps, and so that works really well. Awesome. And then this past season we added Karan Stewart. So from Auburn, represented Jamaica. Still to this day, I think she's 8th all time in the 100-meter. This last year, or actually probably the last couple of years, has been so wicked in this sport. She got moved down a couple of spots. I think she was 4th or 5th going into the last 2 years, and has been bumped down a few times. But just an absolutely phenomenal coach, man. I got pretty fortunate walking her in. And our camp. So fortunately, I don't have to do camps 50 weeks a year.
Yeah, not 52. That's right.
But we have a good bit of camps. We just had our last camp was our holiday camp, which is about 4 days in between Christmas and New Year. And since I've been here, that was our biggest holiday camp. And so I know that's really going to bode well in terms of our marketing efforts and just getting our name out there. Both as Spire and then also as us as a coaching staff. Hey, we're here. It's not just go do track and field camp at Spire, because at the moment still, right, people are like, what's Spire? I don't know what that is. But go do camp with Tim, Karan, and Kibwe, right? If you are an athlete in any one of these events, it's probably a good idea.
It's not bad. Not bad.
Right? If you can get yourself here. So we'll have one for spring break, and then our summer camp season. I think we have 4 or 5, maybe 6 camps over the summer, and one of which is a big 3-weeker. And then the other side of that is, we have designated camp dates, but we're also basically just open at any time. So say an athlete can't come for one of the summer week camps, they could come in May with something that's not really designated at all and stay for 2 or 3 weeks and just, you know what I mean? And then there's a different rate for that sort of thing too, which ends up being, we've had great success actually since I've been here with having athletes just here to train. We call it extended training camp, basically.
You mentioned having some international teams come and train down in Bradenton for IMG. Are you experiencing that yet at Spire, or is that on the goal list as you look towards the future?
So it has happened. The University of Toronto was just here for like a week and a half or so. Yeah. Federations, not yet. I thought we were going to have a couple going into Worlds in Oregon last year. And the 2 places that I was talking to ended up not working out, but that stuff like that. But there just aren't that many events here. And also, usually when Europe is looking for training camps, it is winter months. So we don't really have that advantage. But if anyone's trying to come like during the summer, I think like there is the opportunity, and plus it's pretty quiet, and also like pretty quiet on campus in terms of events and stuff. But the area is like it's banging around here, like Geneva on the Lake, which is kind of right next to it. That place is happening every weekend from Memorial Day to Labor Day.
Really? Like concerts and stuff, or what?
They got like little, it's not like a big like kind of dome or anything, but yeah, there's concerts out there. It's a bit of like a I don't know, like a walk, I guess. I don't know how you say like
a boardwalk, like San Antonio's
kind
of boardwalk
like boardwalk, right? And so there's like, there's restaurants and donut shops and arcades and stuff, and it's really cool. And then a lot of those and then some bars and wineries and stuff, because this area is known for wineries.
Yeah, a lot of wineries. I remember that. Yeah.
It produces the most amount of wine outside of New York or California.
Is that? I didn't know that.
Yeah, this little area. It's crazy.
I remember being in Florida, how many wineries were when I was driving up there. I was like, what? It's not what I would have expected. Yeah. But that much, holy cow, man. Spire needs to have its own wine.
I'm probably moving in that direction. Yeah.
There you go. I knew it. So Kibwe, tell us, what is your role there? So what is, and when I mean your role, meaning what is the goal set? So you're there to help bring the Olympics there in 2032. I know you're not, but please don't actually. You just don't want to handle. You don't want to host the Olympics. But what are your goal sets? Like, what are you working to accomplish with your team, and then the support staff? Because it's not just a Karan and a Tim. You've got financial people, et cetera, marketing people there to help drive things. What's the goals here? What are you going to accomplish there?
So yeah, as the director of the program and coaching throws, like what I want to see happen is just a destination where an athlete can be here and they can get top-notch training, they can have really great schooling, and from the high school age, the extended training age, post-collegiate, there might be a way at some point to have people who are taking like college classes. And so ideally, like when I look at critical factors for how the U.S. develops its athletes versus other countries, right? So other countries, club system. And while there's no shortage of talent in our country, I feel like whenever you see, or at least for the most part, when you see an athlete from another country do really well, or, or beat some of our athletes that were like, what, like we totally didn't think that was going to happen. Oftentimes, that athlete has come from a training situation where they've been with a coach for a long time. You know what I mean? Like, I hesitate to say all the time, but most of the time, that's how it is with a lot of the European athletes, and because of how our system is set up, it's almost impossible. And if I'm thinking of like a dream goal, like that's it. I'd like a kid to go to school from 5th grade and do youth to high school to under 18, to under 20, to seniors, and be able to stay kind of in the same situation, work with the same coaches because my thing is like, if we can do that in America, like they probably at that point have to change the sport because we'd win everything.
Right. Yeah, it is amazing the success that we do have, especially here in the last decade or so, with the how little development that we have specifically in the hammer. It's I think it's officially only in one state. It's unofficially, I think, in two states, high school level, and that's it. And then it's pockets, right? You mentioned Mike Judge and his crew down there. I know there's a great culture up in the Washington area. California area has some good high school hammer coaching culture there, but you're not getting it in Dallas, Texas. You're not getting it in Chicago, Illinois. There actually are two coaches there that work with high schoolers, but not in a there's not a ton of them doing it. I mean, it's one or two, et cetera. So it is quite amazing. And it's kind of thought provoking of what would happen if it became a high school event. Look at the javelin. The javelin's gotten a lot better. Now we're up to, I think, 25 or 26 states, which again is only half, for crying out loud, but we're starting to get more kids in the event earlier, and it'll be, and it's still just in its infant stage in several states. It'll be interesting to see how that grows, that event on the collegiate and then international scene. You got to get these kids involved early, because you're right. You're up against internationals that not only have been consistent with the same coach for a long time, but have been doing it since they were born. That's a hard thing to go up against. That's for sure. Well, Kibwe, you've got to go to practice. So as we wrap up here today, you are one of my favorite, and you've been slacking lately, my friend. One of my favorite social media posts to read because of your Tao of Hammer. Am I pronouncing that right? Is it Tao?
I say Tao. I think
Tao?
it's Tao.
Okay.
All
right. Well, I'm from Alabama, so we say Tao. I used to call PF Chang's Pachangs because I didn't know that F was an E. So it was enlightening to me, the boy from Alabama, when someone was like, "What are you talking about, Pachangs?" And I was like, it's like, yeah, Pachang, man, that's a great restaurant. And they're like, that's PF, you idiot. And I was like, well, I'm from Alabama. So it's Tao of Hammer, but you have these really thought-provoking, not just for hammer, by the way. I mean, they're really focused on hammer, but for a guy who is not a hammer thrower by any means, like I read them, I'm like, well, it makes a lot of sense. Maybe there's something else in life that this should apply to as well. Yeah. Where did that start, kind of this Confucius-like thought process when it comes to the hammer? Not just, hey, do this many turns, hey, release velocity is X. You're talking about, and this is where the full circle comes in, about not fighting yourself. That's what a lot of your philosophical quotes are about, is like, hey, let the hammer work with you, make it an extension of you. Don't fight. You're not muscling this thing. Where did that kind of thought process come into? And then how do you create these quotes, man? Just something you're sitting around waiting for the kids to come to practice and they hit you in the head, or what?
Sometimes. Sometimes it just hits. Sometimes it might be spawned from something, again, like that I'm reading, or part of. I don't know if I can pinpoint exactly when it started, but I think part of the journey. So again, personal journey kind of stuff. But I think I could attribute it to, so at some point in my early career, and I would hear people talk about the event hammer, right? Now I'll never forget the first time I met Lance Steele. I was a freshman on my first big track trip. When I was with Georgia, and we didn't talk that much. But the first time I met him, it was just kind of, a fly on the wall in the midst of everyone else having the conversation. It was like, man, this guy, he really talks about it in a way that was I felt it, but it was clearly over my head. I didn't, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Now, granted, again, this is year one of Hammer, really. And honestly, I was still I was recruited and I went there to throw discus. I threw hammer once a month, maybe, kind of thing. And so fast forward a few more years, and I'm meeting more hammer throwers and guys who are, who are 79, 80, 81, 82, 83 guys. And I observed that they talk about it in a way that is different than everyone else that I might talk to about hammer. And so, okay, well, there's something there. But I think for me, a lot of it was conversations with Lance. Like, so not when I first met him, but as I got older and stuff. And trying to, and then as I started throwing farther, then I would meet up with him at a meet, or just kind of see randomly, and then we talk. And so it turned into being able to essentially kind of understand a little bit more, right? My level of awareness was higher now, because I'm throwing farther, but not necessarily because the ball's going farther. It's because I'm clearly doing different things to it. I'm a little bit more aware of my throw and my place in it as I got older. Okay. And what I thought was that perhaps it might have been pretty abstract. And I thought I might be able to find a way to verbalize more of what like I was feeling. You know what I mean? And now that I say that, I think it is kind of funny, because I mean, people would say, Tao of Hammer is completely abstract. So you just can't win, I guess. I don't know. But essentially, I think that's the answer. Like I was trying to find a way to verbalize not only, well, less important how to throw. It's more of what does it feel like when the throw is like, yes, that's the throw. Here's what it feels like, and how can I help an athlete feel that for themselves, and how can I help a coach help their athlete feel that for themselves?
It's hard to put into words sometimes how we feel, not just emotions, but especially when we talk about athletes and events like hammer and pole vault and high jump, like a lot of body awareness, kinesthetic stuff. And it's like, well, how'd that feel? And, we're asking 18, 19, 20-year-old kids, and they're like, good, bad. So I like the exercise of, well, how do I put that into words, in words that people are going to have to understand, by the way. So I love that. So Kibwe, I'm going to leave you with just a couple of things as we wrap up here today, man. First of all, thank you so much for being here. I'm just so blessed and honored you give us some time to learn about your journey. When your camera is playing some funny tricks, did you notice how it's pulling out? And it almost like there's it was weird. Like a director was you have a director there filming you there, but when it panned out just a minute ago, to your right, the sticker Fortius is there. I want to encourage you. That is the name of your podcast. You did a I'm gonna call it a webinar series that was probably 2 years ago too.
It was the COVID year. Yeah,
it was COVID year, which you had again amazing speakers, hammer thrower, hammer coaches, and stuff like that. But really one of the most extensive sports psychology in that aspect of the sport as well. I want to encourage you to do that in some form or fashion in your role there at Spire, or separately, whatever. But there's a lot of value in the podcast and those webinars that you were doing and are doing that I think there's a lot there and a lot here. And honestly, for you, a lot here, right here in your heart and soul to give. And the last thing I want to encourage you to do is somehow collect all these Tao of Hammer quotes, if you will. I don't know what to necessarily encourage you to do with them, but keep them in a collection, whether they become a little booklet one day or its own social media platform or something. But, again, those are important things that I think transcend hammer, even though they're very, most of them are hammer focused, but there are a lot of person focused type stuff. So I just want to encourage you to, pin those somewhere so that you have easy access to them one day. There's something there for the greater good of specifically, people in our sport and our coaches, and specifically there. So, but you're such a giver, man. That's what I love about you the most. That's what, from the days that I have met you and we've hung out a little bit and at the meets and things like that and had some talks, it's always about, for my perception of you, it's always about giving to others. And I think, as we learned today, that see, there it goes. You got that director. I think it's like a certain position that you.
What if it's like gratitude? It's just feeling
right. I think it really is. It's like, see, Georgia. Like it's always like a reminder. Georgia,
Yeah.
It comes back to Georgia. But I think a lot of we didn't get into this, maybe fortunately or unfortunately, family, although we did talk about grandparents, but you've had a lot of people pour into you, from the Dr. B's and Judd's, and I imagine Don poured into you as well. Honestly, that middle school coach poured into you in his own way of, having you pick up that shot put. So I don't know if you feel this sense, but you certainly act in this sense of giving to others. And I think I'm so happy that you did go into coaching. You could have done a million other things, man. You're such a bright guy and charismatic person. You could have run your own business in some other form or fashion. And you have given a lot of value there, but here in our sport, you're giving so much value to athletes. And I think you have a lot of value to give to other coaches as well. So I just want to encourage you to just explore that and just keep doing what you're doing, man. Just pour fire on pour gas on the fire that you already have burning there. Okay.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. I'll leave it with, one of my favorite things in the multitude of things Judd said is, what I had, I gave. That one. So hearing you say that, like I've never applied that to myself, but like you're right. I think that is what I'm after, and not for the sake of a word like legacy, but like just I think there's stuff there, because at the end of the day, I'm not wanting anyone to do it for me or because of me. Like my aim is the self. You know what I mean? I think hammer and throwing in any other kind of discipline is a tool for self improvement, essentially.
Right. I love it, man. Hey,
maybe not even improvement, just self actualization. Who are you on the inside? Do this thing here: hammer throw, shot put, discus, javelin. Obviously, you will actualize what you are by doing these things.
I love it, man. Hey, and if you listened today and you loved Kibwe's story, I got to encourage you. We've talked about one person a lot, Judd Logan. He has been on the podcast as well. It would be such an honor for him and his family and his legacy. Use the app that you're using right now. If you're watching on YouTube, everything is on there. Just search Judd Logan, Gill Athletics or Gill Connections. That'll bring up his episode. And then I must have been on a hammer kick, because either right before or right after, it was back to back, I had Lance Deal on the podcast, and Lance I've known for a long time as well, working with the University of Oregon for USAs and NCAAs. Just a fantastic human being, by the way. I mean, just funny, amazing storyteller. And I love that, you brought him up and talked about the influence that kind of just listen to him like, wait a minute, he thinks different. He's talking about this event just a little different than I've heard before. So again, I just encourage you, kind of have a hammer palooza, if you will. You got Kibwe here today. Go check out Judd Logan and Lance Deal on the podcast as well. Kibwe, go to practice, man. I'm making you late, and you'd have your athletes in trouble if they were doing it. So thank you so much, Kibwe. Appreciate you, man. Have a great day.
Thank you. Take care, guys.